Till that after Colonel Sanders sold KFC, he still made surprise visits to KFC restaurants. If the food disappointed him, he'd denounce it as goddamn slop or knocking on the floor. In 1973, KFC's owner sued him for libel after he publicly called their gravy sludge with a wallpaper taste. There's a place here in Ireland that sells what's the closest to the old KFC recipe. The fellow who used to own it flew over and met Sanders, became friends with him and then got his permission to use the old recipe and all. Tastes fairly decent. Far better than what KFC tastes like now. Edit bit more on the story. Actually he took off to Canada. Our KFCs here remain vastly different until the mid-90s here. The chicken and salads were better but the PepsiCo uniformity was coming quickly and many KFCs closed up. It almost became forgotten about. Based on KFC now compared to the 80s, I suspect the Colonel would shit himself and have a heart attack if he tried it, or maybe my sense of what's good is skewed by childhood nostalgia. After all, if I got KFC when I was 10 it was a treat and now it means I'm on a road trip and don't feel like McDonald's. Man, I grew up in the 80s and I loved when Mom brought home a bucket of KFC. I haven't eaten there in years, and I remember thinking how far the quality had fallen the last time I did eat there. I can only imagine how delicious KFC was back when that ornery bastard was in charge. Some people might see this as the actions of somebody passionate about their company legacy, but to me he just seems like a knob. If he cared that much he ought not to have sold it. Once he did it was no longer his concern and his opinion didn't matter any more than any other customer. Then don't fucking sell it, if you still want to control it. He wanted the money and a say in what's done with what he no longer owns. And I hope he cleaned up the food off the floor himself, so fast food workers don't have to add that to their workload. What are the odds though? I'll never understand how much shit KFC gets. People are so adamant to say that it's terrible, but I've never had a bad experience with KFC. You get what you pay for, pretty alright fried chicken. Now if you want the good shit, you spend a few more dollars and go to PDQ. Reminds me of Papa John testing the pizzas after he was ousted. I've had over 40 pizzas in the last 30 days, and it's not the same pizza, Schnatter said of the company. Or in the UK check out Miss Millie's of Bristol for some authentic original recipe KFC and even a new spice mix from Colonel Sanders' grandson. He ain't wrong, I would love to try some of the original recipe that's up to his standards. In the UK most of the KFCs seem to be franchised to people who care only about cost. The chicken is far inferior to what I've had in other European countries. For your viewing pleasure, here is Colonel Sanders on What's My Line? Imagine a time when no one knew the face of who probably is one of the most recognizable men on the planet. Apparently KFC pretty much ditched his recipes overnight and the quality was so bad that he and his wife opened their own restaurant with the original recipes. It's in Kentucky and named after his wife. Yes sir, again. No he's still here now, listen you can hear him. Yes sir, something about the gravy and wallpaper. Yes. Right. Okay I will. Yes sir. His pants are full of shit again. Honestly, that's pathetic and dickish on his part. He could have specified he got his own set of franchise restaurants if he couldn't let go. He needed to let other people make their own livings. From my understanding the recipe when not partially prepared ahead of time made in a fast food environment was actually really good. He was also a perfectionist so I can't say I blame him. I grew up in the 80s and 90s so I can only imagine what it was like back then. As a kid, I remember the chicken at least tasted decent, unlike today when it has almost no flavor whatsoever. I was working at a photograph archive in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. Found photos of the Colonel touring the local tech school's restaurant class kitchen and visiting the local KFC. He was quite the character. Remember the time he shot one of his rivals in an argument over a billboard, back when he was operating his restaurant out of a Shell gas station? Both my grandmother and my great-grandmother worked for Colonel Sanders at the original restaurant in Corbin. They always said he had a hot temper and a foul mouth. Lol. Man, imagine going to KFC and a drunken Colonel himself walks in and starts causing a huge scene and calling the food goddamn slop. It would be hilarious. Emo. A podcast called The Dollop did a video on him and it was amazing. There are lots of cool American history videos on there. Really good for sports fans too. I thought he said that the gravy was like wallpaper paste, which would make a lot more sense than a wallpaper taste. What the hell does wallpaper taste like? How does libel work in that instance? Taste is opinion, isn't it? So long as he didn't clearly imply they actually put wallpaper into the gravy. Lol. Till Colonel Sanders chased in wallpaper, at least once maybe more, and used that knowledge to later compare it to gravy with his name on it. He's fucking right though. Never eaten KFC without literally throwing up. Not gonna bother trying to test if third time is the charm. Same thing happened to Papa John. He lost control of his company to greedy profiteers who didn't care about quality. Colonel Sanders talking to Jim Bakker about how God helped him pass a colon polyp. There's an Irish company that still makes the old KFC recipe, link. My father-in-law had his bypass at the Harlan Sanders Cardiac Care Clinic in Mississauga, Ontario. I can't imagine what it used to taste like because their gravy and chicken skin is like my heroin. That was wild when the Colonel hooked up with Mrs. Butterworth. He'd be rolling over in his grave if he tasted it today. Which would also be quite a feat. They should have paid him for quality control inspections and kept him as a friend. Everyone's making fun of him even though he's completely right and KFC is dog shit. I mean, he isn't wrong. Their gravy does taste like sludge. Yummy yummy sludge. Grats on learning what the rest of us have heard about plenty of times. The Colonel was a badass. Adds some odd context to the official KFC Colonel Sanders dating sim. Their gravy does taste like wallpaper paste, as do their biscuits. Seeing how KFC tastes today, sludge might be an improvement. Their gravy and what they call mashed potatoes are hideous. He threw IT on the ground. I'm too drunk to taste this chicken. Colonel Sanders. How the KFC gravy is made.